right. And our last proclamation for this evening is proclamation declaring June 2023 as Pride Month, the City of Falls Church, and Ms. Hiscott will do the honors.
Whereas June is recognized as Pride Month nationwide as a celebration of sexual and gender diversity and spread awareness of the efforts to establish and preserve equal rights for LGBTQ+ people. And whereas Pride Month has its origins in the riots, protests, and anti-discrimination campaigns of the 1960s that LGBTQ+ community members organized to fight for equal rights at every level of government. And whereas the commemoration of these events underscores our determination to support, preserve, and advance the civil rights guaranteed for all human beings. And whereas defending the rights of the LGBTQ+ community members is paramount at a time when a wave of homophobic and anti-transgender legislation is sweeping the nation. And whereas the City Council has demonstrated support for people of all backgrounds and identities, including transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming persons, as well as people of varying sexual orientations through government policies and legislation. And whereas city-run programs, events, and activities are open for all to participate in a manner consistent with their gender identity and sexuality. And whereas the City of Falls Church is proud of the meaningful, long-lasting impacts that LGBTQ+ people have made and the contributions that they have brought to the city's rich and diverse culture. And whereas the City of Falls Church joins the LGBTQ+ community in celebrating diversity and unity.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, do hereby proclaim the month of June 2023 as Pride Month in the City of Falls Church and urge all residents to respect and honor our diverse community and celebrate and build a culture of inclusiveness and acceptance. All right, how about a round of applause for that? Is there anyone in the group who would like to accept this proclamation? What's that? Okay, come on down. You're welcome to say a few remarks as well if you'd like.
Hello, council members. Thank you so much for this gesture. I'm Brian Reach. I'm the president and executive director of Nova Pride. I'm also the executive director of LGBT Falls Church and a reporter with Falls Church News Press. I wanted to thank you on behalf of the community. I also wanted to thank you because it's been maybe 10 years of proclamations for Pride Month in the Virginia area. They're often the same, and this time you actually pointed out what's happening today and the current climate and the 500 bills across the country trying to target trans kids and kind of gaslight people and send us back into something we thought was over, the conversation about whether someone's bedroom is a part of a public conversation. So I really appreciate you being forward and current and paying attention. So thanks for your words.
Thank you. Come on down. Would you like to receive the proclamation? All right, that concludes our meeting this evening. Now we're just getting started, but thank you all for being here. So now we're on to more of the business on tonight's agenda. The first is oaths of office. Madam Clerk, are there any oaths of office to administer this evening?
I don't think so, but if anyone's here, let us know. I think we're all set.
All right, Ms. Hardy.
Great. Before moving on to the receipt of public comment, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge actually Mayor Tarter's announcement of his retirement and thank him. While we've got an audience still, I think it's a bittersweet milestone. Many of us up here have not served with a different mayor, and many of us in the community have not lived in the city under a different mayor, and it's been a really remarkable 17 years of service. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that he's been on city council since 2012 and mayor since 2014. And much of the good that we see in the community is in part due to his leadership and his steady hand, especially over some very tumultuous times over the past several years. So I wanted to thank Dave for his leadership. I think we'll have much more to say in the coming 6 months, but I wanted to at least take time before we get to the meat of the agenda to acknowledge and thank you, Dave, for his service.
And thank you so much for the kind words. It's truly been an honor for me these past years. And so bittersweet decision, but I think it was the right one. But it's been a real honor and pleasure to be up here and to serve this community and serve with you all as well. So thank you very much. So anyway, we don't have any oaths of office. How about any receipt of public comment? We got plenty.
We do. Let's see here. So to start with, we have Mary Kate Hughes.
Good evening. I'm Bobby. I'm Juno. And I'm Oliver. We are fifth graders at Oak Street Elementary in Miss Hughes' class. All fifth graders do a project called Exhibition as the culmination of the primary year's program of IB. Our exhibition project is on refugees in Syria and Ukraine. Our goal is to raise awareness about the refugee crisis so people will realize the horrors of what refugees experience and be motivated to act.
We will start by sharing some of what we have learned throughout our research.
Most refugees are given 3 options for what to do with them and or their family. First is encampment, where they're given basic shelter, usually in the form of tents, although the living conditions are extremely poor. An example of this is that it can reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit inside one of the shelters. Medical care and education is often of very poor quality. Next is urban destitution. Usually the living conditions are slightly nicer, but you're forced to live in extreme poverty, and shelters are also very small, often consisting of the size of one table. Lastly, we have the dangerous journey, where you risk your life for a safe place to live. Thousands of people die from this option, and even if you do make it to another country, you'll still have to face racism and xenophobia, even if you make it. So now we'll go more in depth. First, we'll talk about the conflict in Syria. So there's a war in Syria. It's been going on for about 12 years now. That has called the Syrian Civil War. It started in 2011, the protest known as the Arab Spring. Basically, it was a protest throughout the Middle East and Northern Africa demanding that Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, whose military force and police brutality to get his way, step down. He responded violently and ordered his police to beat the protesters. This sparked a war. In this war, over 300,000 civilians have been killed.
Here's how the Syrian civil war has impacted refugees. There have been nearly 13 million people displaced, over half of the half of the Syrian population, 6.8 of which are internally displaced. 5.5 million are refugees and have sought asylum in countries such as Turkey and Lebanon. And there are 15.3 million people requiring humanitarian assistance.
Now let's talk about the conflict in Ukraine. There is a refugee crisis due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and it began in February of 2022. Russia is trying to restore the power of the Soviet Union. In the process, President Vladimir Putin and his army have been committing harsh war crimes. More than 25,000 civilians have been killed. Let's talk about the impact of the conflict in Ukraine. Nearly 14 million Ukrainians have been displaced. 5.9 million of those Ukrainians have been internally displaced. 8 million Ukrainians that have sought refuge already in other countries such as Poland and Russia. 17.6 million Ukrainians requiring humanitarian assistance. 23% of all that are children. Now that you have a sense of the global refugee crisis, we ask you that you please donate, raise awareness, and you do everything in your power to help these refugees. You can visit our website or listen to our forthcoming podcast to learn more. You might ask, what can one person do?
Our answer is that one alone will not have a big impact, but together we can make a difference.
Together we can raise awareness.
Together we can save lives.
Together we can end this crisis. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Very impressive. Come on. Why don't you guys come on down? We'll give you our hearty thanks. And how about, come on down. We'll get a picture with you all. So you all have your own website and podcast? Man, that's impressive. You got to tell me how to do that when you get up here.
Engineer can design a big enough treatment to treat 100%. So the question is, what are we trying to achieve? Is this, are we concerned about blood coverage because it's water, or are we concerned about?
Phil, I'm sorry, we can't hear you very well. I'm sorry?
That was another attendee that just joined, muted now.
I'm sorry, okay. Very impressive young folks. You got bright futures ahead of you. I'm very confident of that. So thanks for coming out this evening. All right, who's next, Madam Clerk?
Next, we have Tori McKinney.
All right, Tori. When you're done, tell us about Tinner Hill Festival. I know, that's a joke.
Thank you, the Honorable Mayor Tarter and the Honorable Council members. Thanks for having us tonight. I have some of our amazing volunteers with us, but I just wanted to, I have so much gratefulness. We could not do this festival that represents the Tinner Hill Heritage Foundation. It's the premier charity event, and we have it co-presented by the City of Falls Church and the Tinner Hill Heritage Foundation. It's on June 10 from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's at Cherry Hill Park. And our lineup is amazing. We have a band from New Orleans Dumpster Funk and a memorable Joe Louis Walker blues musician. So you can get tickets and info at tinnerhill.org. I would like to personally thank not only our council, who every single one of you volunteer and support the festival, but also Danny Schlitt and Park and Rec, who literally carries us and does a boatload of the heavy lifting. So I'd also like to thank our sponsors, who also we couldn't do without their support. So we have Arlington Magazine, Broad in Washington, which is Insight, Custom Park Services, Diener and Associates, EYA, Falls Church News Press, Founders Row, LIG, Rockstar Realty Group. Soul Good Kitchen is being honored by a grant from an anonymous sponsor. Action Music, Allstate Insurance, Arlington Condo, Brooks Chiropractor Rehab, CD Seller, Coca-Cola Company has stepped up, Federal Realty, First Heritage Mortgage, Fox's Music, Hallman Jenkins, Harvey's, Providence Players, Titan Title, Quinn's Auction House, Solace Brewery, and Walsh Colucci, Lubelli and Walsh. Honestly, we can't thank everyone enough, and our volunteers who are represented here tonight, including Lindy Hockenberry, who's been a part of the festival and foundation for 15 years. Laura Liner, who runs the Rockstar Realty Group Beer Garden, and Oh my God, Mariam Garriga, who stepped up to the plate to assist us. So again, I want to thank everyone. Again, tinnerhill.org for information and tickets, and come out on June 10.
We'll do it. Thank you. All right, who's next?
Next, we have Keith Conway. Keith Conway. Next is Elijah Pelton.
Good evening, honorable council members and the honorable mayor. My name is Elijah Pelton. I am a student in 12th grade at Meridian High School. I work for an organization called Change the Ref, founded by Manuel and Patricia Oliver, their son who was killed in the Parkland shooting. They recently published this book called Joaquin's First School Shooting, and I'd like to read it to you all today. Joaquin's first school shooting. The end of the day was also my own. Let out on the floor and never got home. We heard a loud bang, then off went the alarm. My classmates freaked out, and I tried to keep calm. He took aim and fired, again and again. One life at a time, my friends met their end. He came up the stairs, hunting for more. That's when we all panicked, and we ran for the door. We tried to get clear, but it was a bit late. It was his machine gun that decided our fates. Our country is numb to violence like this. Politicians don't care. They still keep their seats. We must not forget, or I've died in vain. Enough is enough. Please, never again. There's a picture here of Joaquin Oliver, their son, and an inscription that reads, Guac is forever. Joaquin Oliver was a caring, creative, and passionate young man who always brought a smile to people's faces. Joaquin was one of 17 people killed by a mass shooter on Valentine's Day 2018 at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. 5 years later, the regulations governing access to high-powered automatic weapons have not changed. I'm up here today to thank the council for the work that they've done for putting the pressure on the state legislature and the governor's office to enact this. And while this work is not over, the council has made substantial progress with things like the Wear Orange Proclamation and the safe storage bill that was passed. I would also like to say that I recognize the work that you guys are all doing, and I'm not pointing anything at you by reading this here. But thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your work. Madam Clerk, who's next?
Next, we have Huainam Nguyen. Sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly.
Good evening.
Good evening. All right. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Huainam Nguyen. I am a community member who grew up in Northern Virginia, and I'm an organizer with Viet Place Collective. I have a couple comments tonight regarding the East End Small Area Plan. First, I wanted to commend the City of Falls Church staff, City Council, Planning Commission, and planning staff for taking the necessary steps to get input and feedback on the small area plan from the most affected parties. I appreciate that after the January 18th listening session, you paused on the plan and chose to do more outreach to those who we had not heard from before, which are the predominantly Vietnamese business owners at Eden Center and the greater Vietnamese community. Taking these necessary steps and doing what needs to be done is what makes you all great public servants. Thanks to pop-ups at Eden Center and several other opportunities to talk to city planners, I and many others were able to give you our feedback and thoughts on the small area plan. I was pleased to see suggestions from the community were incorporated into the revised plan, and I encourage City Council and staff to include as many protections as possible for the small businesses to combat displacement and to strengthen these protections as much as possible. I know the property owner has stated many times that they never plan to redevelop Eden Center, and I believe them. However, promising to never redevelop Eden Center is not an anti-displacement strategy. The property owner controls what happens on their property, but does not have control over the surrounding properties, nor do they control the changing retail landscape and market pressures around Eden Center. That is why strong, legally binding anti-displacement strategies are necessary to protect these businesses and to ensure their survival if redevelopment occurs in the surrounding area. Eden Center and the community that is formed there are very special and very unique. It is the #1 destination in the City of Falls Church. This is the reason why the small area plan includes many measures and recommendations not found in previous plans, because no other POA has a unique cultural center like this. That is why I encourage the city to include these small business protections in the final small area plan and to write them in the city code. I know that as great public servants, you understand the importance of everything I've mentioned tonight, and I believe that you will take the necessary steps to make sure they are achieved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And by the way, we'll get to the Environmental Sustainability Council's report. I think we took that a little out of order. But anyway, let's keep on going with our public comment.
Next, we have Shannon Gunn.
Hello. Hi, my name is Shannon Gunn. I am the Artistic Executive Director of Jazz for Justice and also the Jazz Ensemble Director at Northern Virginia Community College and at Levine. And I'm here totally independent from the teaching side to invite you all as the Artistic Executive Director of Jazz for Justice I'm inviting you to attend Jazz for Justice at Mr. Brown's Park on Monday, September 4th, Labor Day holiday in the afternoon. And I wanted to say thank you to the Department of Parks and Rec for allowing us to rent the park that day. And I wanted to let you all know that it's an amazing event. We had it 2 years already, and we're doing it a 3rd year. And I just wanted to invite you all out. We create partnerships between the business community, the legal community, and the music community to advocate for access to justice and provide high quality art music for the community to enjoy. This is a free event, anybody can attend, and it will have jazz ensembles and a jam session. And it's a really fun event. I just wanted to let you all know about it and consider yourselves invited.
All right, thank you so much. We appreciate that. We'll put that on our calendars. Madam Clerk?
Next, we have Ben Lee.
Welcome.
Hi, Mayor Tarter and City Council members. Thank you for giving me this moment to speak. I'm also an organizer with Viet Place Collective, and we've spent the past several months working tirelessly with city planners and on behalf of the small business owners to create an inclusive vision for what we hope will be a Little Saigon neighborhood in the little city, Falls Church City. The city has an incredible opportunity to capitalize on and further develop this vibrant destination. Falls Church has an opportunity to promote the tourism and to be really a lively little city that it can be. There have been questions why anti-displacement measures or programming funded with reinvestments of some of the meals tax dollars, for example, is important to include in the guiding document that is the East End Small Area Plan. And I'd like to bring up an example, what could happen without action. The vibrant neighborhood could be another DC caricature of a Chinatown. Before our involvement in our advocacy, the East End Small Area Plan recommended the preservation of Vietnamese character, but there were little concrete steps to do that. And city planning has now revised the plan to incorporate a lot of specific recommendations that came from the Small Business Anti-Displacement Network, for example, which is based out of the University of Maryland. And without this intentionality that now is in the revised plan, you'll have buildings that have, Sephora or Starbucks that are phonetically spelled out with Vietnamese diacritics, right? That's what we see in the DC Chinatown. This past week, the National Trust for Historic Preservation posted a list of America's 11 most endangered historic places. Of those 11, 2 are Chinatowns in Seattle and in Philadelphia. The third is a little Santo Domingo, a Dominican community in Miami, Florida. So this is a national trend happening across the country in cities all over. And the Vietnamese small businesses are what makes this corner of Falls Church one of 2 notable regional destinations in Falls Church City, along with the State Theater. And it is not uncommon to see people with Pennsylvania license plates. And today I just stopped by to get some tea. And there's West Virginia cars and North Carolina that make this area, they come to this area specifically to visit these small businesses. And they are the main attractions to this corner of Falls Church. And so with that national trend in mind that I mentioned earlier, that the National Trust for Historic Preservation brought up, Falls Church City has an opportunity to be a leader and show that it is possible to grow the city and also preserve an existing community, something that Arlington County failed to do so in the 1980s. Sorry, am I out of time?
You're out of time, but I tell you, you can keep going for a bit more, but just for everyone's benefit, the speakers are generally limited to 3 minutes.
Okay.
And
sorry.
so that's so everyone can get a chance, and we're not here till 3 a.m. But anyway,
Just two sentences.
It's fine, go for it. We appreciate it, and we appreciate everything about the Eden Center, so thank you. Continue.
So I was saying that Arlington County, it was something that they could not do. A lot of the storefronts back in the 80s, they wanted to preserve that, but there weren't strong measures to help keep the businesses there. There's only one Vietnamese restaurant left in Clarendon. And the businesses relocated to this corner of Falls Church, not because the metro opened, because Arlington didn't have strong protections. And Falls Church City has an opportunity to be a leader and show other cities across the country how it can be done correctly for this refugee community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk?
Next, we have Lin Huang.
All right, welcome.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Hello, Vice Mayor, and all of our council members. Thank you so much for giving me the time today. First, I want to say happy AANHPI Heritage Month. I'm Lin Huang, a longtime resident of Northern Virginia. I'm a huge fan of the Little Saigon District in Falls Church City. This is where I feel at home, connecting with friends and family over delicious Vietnamese food and especially bubble teas. And in fact, I know that people from around the entire region come to our Falls Church City because of this cultural gem that we have. So let's do our best to protect this amazing treasure. And as we celebrate AANHPI Heritage Month, it is an opportunity for the city to recommit to the value of inclusion and diversity by supporting Vietnamese American businesses in our city. Redevelopment should not displace our diverse community. We have a right to be here. We contribute to the vitality of Falls Church, and our businesses contribute significantly to the tax base. The Vietnamese American community knows firsthand the sting of erasure and displacement when the redevelopment of Clarendon ignored the interests of Vietnamese American businesses. There's nothing left but a shadow and an echo. Let's not make that same mistake again. Cultural districts around the U.S. are disappearing due to irresponsible development, but Falls Church has a unique opportunity to lead and build a more inclusive city for all. Not only is it a right thing to do, but it makes economic sense. I want to thank the city staff and city leadership for listening to the needs of and concern of Vietnamese American businesses, and especially incorporating some of those suggestions and revising the redevelopment plan. So I want to thank you for doing that, and I look forward to continue working together to build and elevate our Little Saigon in Falls Church City. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk?
Next, we have Alan Frank.
Good evening, Mayor Tarter, and congratulations on your retirement. Mr. Duncan, it's good to hear your voice. Thank you to the staff. We like this plan. I'm Alan Frank, and I'm from Eden Center, and I'm speaking about the small area plan that the staff and us, we've all worked very hard on for quite a long time now. Although we've never had a lot of interest in the small area plan, it is happening. We didn't have a lot of interest because I thought it would be misunderstood, and I think it has been misunderstood. We also don't have any plans to redevelop Eden Center. In fact, our plan is just the opposite, which puts us on common ground with the Vietnamese community. We all love it. We all want to keep it. But it's a vision. The plan is a vision. And the process, if we ever did redevelop, it would be long and detailed. There'd be plenty of involvement. And if it ever happened, there would be some displacement, and we'd have to work that out with our tenants, with the city. It would be quite a mess, and we don't want that ever to happen. But, you know, maybe 50 years from now it does. I don't know. But we will try to keep Eden Center here forever. Meanwhile, we will continue to do what we've done for 40 years, which is to work closely with the Vietnamese community, with our small business tenants, and the city to run our business, which I think we've done pretty well. We are 100% full, and we have a waiting list. In order to do this, we have to be treated like every other business in the city. If tenant displacement is something that this council would like to discuss and pass an ordinance, then fine, we'll participate in that process. But that doesn't belong in this plan. This is a long-range vision plan, and if the city wants to do something for tenants that ultimately get displaced, then it's fine. It should apply to every part of the city, not just the 6700 block of Wilson Boulevard. Part of the plan mentions narrowing Wilson Boulevard. If you want to damage Eden Center, narrow Wilson Boulevard. We are opposed to that. Improve Wilson Boulevard. Part of the plan suggests that Wilson Boulevard be renamed Saigon Boulevard. Well, that was done, I think it was about 15 years ago. We noticed the other day, or a couple of weeks ago, that some of the signs are gone, and we've reordered signs. They'll go up in the next couple of weeks. May I have just another minute?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Little Saigon East. Someone had an idea of renaming that area of town, an unspecified part of that area of town, as Little Saigon East. Good intention, but a bad idea. It would damage the Eden Center brand, which we have worked on for so long. And I've spoken with leaders of prominent Vietnamese organizations, and they also oppose the idea. When there's a public hearing, I think you'll hear from some of those people. So our plan, I'll sum up, is to do what we have already done successfully, to keep doing it. We have a huge opportunity to continue to invest in Eden Center, to continue to invest in the city, to keep our small businesses viable like we've done over all these years, and particularly through the pandemic, which almost wiped out like 80% of our businesses. We're going to keep attracting large numbers of tourists to the city. We're going to keep employing large numbers of people, paying a lot of taxes, and providing the best Vietnamese food in the U.S. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dao T Lou.
Welcome.
Evening. Dear Mayor and City Council member, allow me to stay here, present here today. The first thing I would like to introduce me. My name is Dao Lou. I escaped from Vietnam by boat. After 3 days and 3 nights, I came to Malaysia. And after that, I stayed there almost for a year, waiting permission to the United States. And after that, I came here 1994. And now the second thing, I would like to perhaps present here for my friend who is business owner and is not able to attend today. Because Monday is the only day she had off to be with her family. I will read the statement in Vietnamese. Tôi tên Sương Nguyễn, là chủ hàng bánh cuốn Sài Gòn từ năm 1996 đến 2018 và là co-owner cho đến nay. Tôi vẫn đang cố gắng truyền dạy cho thế hệ sau nối tiếp niềm đam mê rất mãnh liệt trong tôi để bảo tồn truyền thống văn hóa thể hiện qua những món ăn thuần túy Việt Nam. Tôi được đến Mỹ tị nạn sau khi chồng tôi là thiếu tá không quân bị tù 14 năm dưới chính quyền Cộng sản. Vào tháng 4 1996, 2 tháng sau tôi làm việc cho nhà hàng trong Eden Center và 6 năm sau tôi mở tiệm bánh cuốn Sài Gòn trong Eden Center. Ý nghĩa của tên nhà hàng là món bánh cuốn thuần túy của người Việt Nam ở thành phố nhỏ Sài Gòn của quê hương tôi. Vì thế, điều mơ ước của tôi cũng như cộng đồng là thay đổi tên Little Sài Gòn, nơi mà tôi và cộng đồng đã cống hiến hơn 33 năm qua. To summarize, my friend came to the US after her husband had been imprisoned by the communist government for 14 years. She named her business Bánh cuốn Sài Gòn to honor her Lord home and our Lord home. It is her hope and our hope too, as well that the city will rename the neighborhood Little Saigon. Thank you and good evening it allowed me today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
The last speaker slip I have is for Lindy Hockenberry.
All right, Lindy.
Thank you. Lindy Hockenberry, I now live at 450 North Washington Street. And since I'm already here, I thought I'd bring a big concern of mine, and hopefully we can all solve it together. But I'm talking about the cutoff to get on to 66 to get over to Haycock. But everybody knows that you've got to turn right coming out of the Henderson Meridian campus. And so then you get onto the Route 66 and immediately get off. And that lower part of it that goes into Haycock Road is so full of humongous, huge, very large, I could go on, potholes. And it is an absolute danger to all that drive there. The other night in particular, I came out at night and couldn't see them all, so I hit a few. But I know it probably is a VDOT concern, but something really should take place over the summer when the schools are not in, because we have no choice but to use that or come all the way down 66, which if you want to go into the City of Falls Church, do any shopping or anything, you've got to go that way. And, I realize that all the wonderful, wonderful construction going on up there, it is fantastic. But if you could do anything about that hunk of road and get it fixed, it's just really bad. Thank you. And thank you to all of you for everything you do up there on City Council and everything you do with the city. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at public comment? Senator Peterson, I see you in the audience. Is there something are you for a particular matter? Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Let's go on then to summary of written comments. Would you like to do that, Madam Clerk?
Sure, we have a very short one. Sean Dakin asked that city landscape teams use electric leaf blowers rather than gas-powered leaf blowers. And that's it.
That's a short one. Let's go on now to the ESC annual report. I'm sorry, I got you guys out of order. Maybe kept you a little bit longer than might have anticipated otherwise, but thank you for your patience.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Joseph Shirizzi. I'm the chair of the Environmental Sustainability Council for the City of Falls Church, and I'm here this evening to give our 2022 annual report and also answer any questions you have about how things on the ESC are going. This report summarizes the activities and accomplishments of the City of Falls Church ESC and sets out goals for 2023, looking forward and things that are coming up for us. The ESC advises City Council on environmental issues affecting the city and its residents. We meet monthly. We have 9 positions. I'm the chair, and John Ward is vice chair. We have 3 subcommittees that report to the ESC: the Energy Transition Subcommittee, led by John Ward; the Habitat Restoration Task Group, led by Amy Crumpton; and the Education Task Group, which runs Operation Earthwatch, who was here earlier this evening, led by Tina Ho. Membership in these subcommittees is open to any city residents, and we do have a open position right now, actually, if anyone is interested in volunteering from this room. And our staff liaison is Andy Young in the corner. In 2022, the ESC reviewed several proposals, made several recommendations to City Council, and endorsed several letters to City Council written by other subcommittees. The ESC reviewed proposed T-zone updates, and we advocated for increasing mixed-use density to help us reach regional climate goals by supporting walkable neighborhoods which are less car-dependent. Increasing density is good for the environment, and the ESC also made several specific recommendations that we've asked to be added to the T-zone updates to help meet electricity usage and green building policies inside of the T-zone updates. We jointly hosted a webinar addressing multiple challenges of building safe bike infrastructure in urban environments, and we've been working with local planning experts who presented their experience during a panel at an ESC meeting. And along those lines, we endorsed a CACT letter encouraging the city to prioritize bike lanes and micromobility infrastructure. And we've also had data show that the number one reason people don't bike to school, bike to work, or around the city is that they don't feel safe doing so. So we've been advocating very heavily for the introduction of protected bike lanes in the city. None of which there are in Falls Church right now. So looking forward, if I can come over here, our goals for 2023, the 2040 vision of the City of Falls Church affirms that the city will strive to be a leader in environmental sustainability. One element of achieving that goal is reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. The city committed in 2017 and reaffirmed in 2020 those goals. The city is not currently on track to meet our own or regional emission reduction goals by 2030. So the council has voted multiple times to accept greenhouse gas reduction goals. We are not on track to meet them, and further changes to the city, to policies are desperately needed immediately if we're going to meet any of the goals that we've set long term. Number 1 on meeting those goals is reduce transportation-related greenhouse gas and pollutant emissions. A great way to do that is following the recommendations in the CACT letter written for promoting protected bike lanes. Second is to support sustainability and resilience in the built environment. We'd like to conduct a robust review of criteria and voluntary concessions to determine how more strongly to prioritize environmental sustainability. and anticipate and support city staff's development of community-wide green building policy. So we've made the same comments many times over and over to developers coming for Founders Row, for One City Center, for the Eden Center. Very similar comments have been made by ESC, by our members, and others in the community of what we expect from these type of projects. And it would save developers money, so more homes could be built. It would be faster and less redundant. I think just better overall if there was a green building policy in place in the city. We could do a lot with that, and so that's one of our goals for the next year. We're currently working on an energy action plan, and this will include a review, input, and public outreach on the development of a strategy for government operations and to ensure all municipal energy use, including schools, comes from renewable energy uses, and other recommendations that we're working on through the energy action plan. The ESC is supportive of green space improvements, stormwater improvements, and consumption and waste improvements, and will support the development of a new solid waste management plan. So lots of plans coming up. I think instead of making the same comments again and again, it would be easier if a lot of these things were specifically laid out for people to follow. And we have these recommendations. Excluding myself, I think the ESC has some really incredible individuals with a lot of amazing experience working for various environmental organizations in the government and nonprofits. I'm actually blown away by the members' expertise, and I really think that we should rely on it as much as possible as we come up with these plans and make these specific recommendations. So that is my my summary, I guess, a bit of what's coming up and the ESC goals. Thank you for your time this evening. I really appreciate it. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
All right. Well, thank you for your fine work and your group. I think you all have raised the bar significantly on a lot of issues. Biking, for example, is now something I think we're all really thinking hard about how to solve that issue, and so many others. But this community has come so far on environmental issues just the past, I'd say, 5 years. It's pretty significant. So we thank you for your leadership as a group and for you individually on this issue or on these issues. I know we got some questions up here. We'll start with Ms. Hiscott.
Thank you.
Not so much many questions. I just wanted to say Joseph's definitely selling himself short, but I wanted to echo what he was saying about the expertise that we have in our board and commission. It's absolutely incredible to sit in those meetings and look around the room and look at all the expertise that we have in Falls Church City, and so grateful for so many community members to bring that expertise and significant time investments forward to make things better for all of us here in the city. We're all grateful for that. Joseph, would you give just a quick highlight to council about where we are with the Energy Action Plan? Like, we're coming there, the consultants are coming back to us, or maybe Andy wants to speak to it. I think June timeframe with some of the results that we discussed last week. Maybe you want to touch on that just briefly?
Yes, last month we did a town hall at the new high school. We had dozens of participants from the community weigh in on their priorities. We had education and some booths run by the high school students presenting things that they had learned. A lot of that input and the expertise of the people in the group and of the consultant has been put into a first, I would say, outline, not necessarily draft of the plan that was presented to us last week. And in the next month, we expect to have I think like a first full draft of that. There will be a time, I believe, about 4 weeks for input, and then it will be presented to council some point in July, I think. Is any of that correct?
Yes, I think Joseph did pretty well with that. So we're on the slate to come, or I guess I'm on the slate to come give you all an update at the June 5th council meeting. So I think several of you had asked kind of for an interim update before we got too far along in the plan. So we'll have that for you in 2 weeks. We'll We'll have a draft plan, as Joseph was outlining, put together in the month of June, get some feedback from staff, probably back with the ESC again, with the goal of having a final plan. I think we're tentatively on the schedule for council for a work session July 10th, and then adoption on July 24th. So that's the government plan. I think, that's what Joseph was talking about. We're working two plans in parallel. So in addition to the plan focused on government operations, which is what we're working on first, we're also working on a community-wide plan, and that's on a longer timeline. So that'll be into September before that'll be complete.
Thanks. And I think that's important as we look at any year end, if we have any opportunity to increase our expenditures based upon our expected increase in revenue. I think that's going to be really important and good timing to know more about those plans, because we've obviously invested in the consultants to have come up with the plans. Now we need to invest in the results in the plan of action. Thank you both very much for all of your work.
Thank you.
Ms. Hardy?
Thank you for the update. So when I read the report, one thing that I was struck by, besides obviously the free labor that Debbie acknowledged serves on the ESC, is the number of boards and commissions you also partner with. So really appreciate that you guys work with the CCT, this is the alphabet soup, the UFC, the Swim Pack, the Public Utilities Commission. So I think it just shows the breadth and importance of environmental work. So thank you for that. To Debbie's point about making sure that plans are only as good as we fund them and implement them. I guess a note for city staff is, as the plans come in front of us in July and later, to kind of sync that up with either the annual budget process or year-end budget amendments, because I think many of us would like to see action and not just plans that sit on a shelf. So something to put a pin on for the July conversations.
Exactly. Thank you. And, we are always happy to weigh in when we're coming up with the line items for certain amounts of money. Say if, $800,000 a year has been put aside for, walkability improvements, we're always happy to say, make recommendations on where specifically that would go and where the most bang for your buck in terms of environmental impact would be.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. And we look forward to further collaboration in this coming year.
Thank you for the time.
All right, let's move on now to the report of the city manager. Ms. Master.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have two sort of large topics on the city manager's report today. So the only thing I'll highlight besides those is, of course, we have Memorial Day coming up for our events, and since we won't have a work session on the 29th, and I wanted just to flag that this evening for the honoring of our servicemen and the parade and so forth. The two things for the manager's report that I would really like to focus on is the community survey results, because we do have that briefing for you this evening. We had great turnout from the participants who were selected randomly, and it closed quickly because we reached the threshold, so we were able to provide that report this evening. And we will also do the East End area plan update so that you can hear where we are aligned with the public comment you had this evening before it comes back to you for action. So for the first part, for the community survey, I'd like to ask Adam Problesky from Problesky's Research to come up. He has come in from California in order to present to you this evening the results of the survey. In your packet, you do have the staff report that provided a little background on the company and the methodology. And we did brief also the council, the staff this morning, so they've had an overview, and then you'll get this briefing. And then our plan is subsequently to do some more deep dive into the data and then look at opportunities for implementing. So tonight is a good overview, a chance for council to give initial reaction and comments, and then staff will be working in more detail with that report. And with that, I am going to toggle over to the presentation, I hope. All right, and hopefully, Adam, you'll be able to advance.
We're there. Hopefully we're there. Adam Probalski, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you for having me this evening. It's been a pleasure to work with your staff, with Cindy and Susan and and your GIS team. We really love GIS teams. They're really important to the work we do. And I'm going to get right into the results. This is a condensed version, kind of an executive version for you all. The full report is a couple hundred pages that you can read through if you really want to, which I encourage. A lot of open-ended responses, the real words that people either told us on the phone or wrote out themselves, talking about their concerns, their ideas, their hopes for the city. So some of that is something that's available to you to read through. I'll get to the methodology real quick. Okay, so I don't want to belabor the methodology, but this is a statistically valid representative survey of everyone in this community. What that means is we got the right number of men and women, people of all genders, I'll say, people of different ethnic and racial backgrounds, people from different age groups and incomes, and all the different folks in the city. We did offer the survey in addition to English. We offered in Spanish and Vietnamese. We didn't have a lot of participation in those languages, but it definitely makes the survey more inclusive and more representative of the community. 400 to some people might sound like, well, that's not a lot. But just to give you kind of some perspective, statewide, we'd probably do a survey of about 900. So 400 in Falls Church is very robust to give you a real clear picture of what people are thinking. And so with that, we'll move along to the next slide. This kind of shows some dots. We don't like to, we never expose individual respondents, but this gives you a picture that the respondents are very well dispersed throughout the city. And then moving along to our first question, or well, some key findings. 89% overall say there's a good quality of life. 90% say they're satisfied with the service provided by the city. High marks for inclusivity in various ways. And there are some challenges identified. I'm going to tell some really rosy numbers here, but we will point out a couple things where people do have concerns over taxes they pay and traffic congestion and street conditions. So let's really get into some of the key numbers. The first question we ask is almost always an open-ended response. We want to get people talking to us, feel like they're participating in the survey. And in this case, the biggest important thing that I can point out here is, yes, population and growth is a concern. Housing affordability, which kind of conflicts with number one a bit, is a concern. But we don't see something here that is 40, 50, 60%. There's nothing that stands out dramatically that says we are angry about something. And that's a positive thing. Those numbers dispersed, and certainly things you want to address, but nothing that stands out in a broad way, which is really encouraging. Moving along, 97% say that their overall quality of life in Falls Church is good or fair. I'll say this: we don't put a value judgment on fair. Fair is okay. Fair is the way it's fine. It's okay. So we kind of put that in with the positives. So 97% say the quality of life is there. Moving along to the next question. It's an open-ended question. Again, you get to read the words people say. Here we've encapsulated it. What do you like most about living in Falls Church? And you can see walkability is really high. Kind of unique for us, not something that we always see in other communities throughout the country. And we do this in hundreds of other communities throughout the country. From there, you have this small town feel, proximity to DC, some other things that kind of pop out there, but nothing, off the charts, just this kind of small town feel and walkability is big. We do, in the next slide, identify where people work. The biggest group of your residents work in DC, but a pretty sizable chunk work in Falls Church, and then cascading down from there. The next slide, I think, is really helpful from a planning perspective. You have 70% of your workforce working at least one day a week in Falls Church, working from home. So that really changed the dynamic to some degree with sales tax, to some degree with traffic, to some degree with roads, and programming and things like that. So kind of this unique data that a lot of communities don't necessarily have, and that can be very helpful for you for programming. Next up, we ask a question about things that that residents might be concerned about. And you can see that this doesn't add up to 100 because they were able to select as many as they wanted. And our goal here is to give you this idea of what really is on the minds of your residents and what they're what they have concerns over. It's interesting here, and I don't want to read too much into this because you'll see some contrasting numbers later on, but the number one is the amount of money they pay for local taxes. That's a top concern of theirs. And then amount of traffic on the roads, and then conditions in local streets. You can kind of see there's a little bunching up there in the 50s, but none of these other things can be dismissed because they're all have significant part of your population concerning about them. Next, we'll go to a slide that kind of gives similar numbers, but it says, okay, now we have a list of services provided by the city. Which are the ones that are important to you personally? They want to take ownership. And you can see maintaining parks and trails and open space really jump off there at almost 2/3 with 66%. And maintaining sidewalks and crosswalks and neighborhood traffic calming is pretty high up there as well. And then again, this theme of streets and roads is high there. So we kind of look at those several at the top and say, okay, that's your priority. If you're going to be out in the community talking to your constituents, you're going to focus on those things. And either you're focusing on the things that you're going to do to make them better, or you're going to focus on the things that you're already doing in your budget and on those issues. The next slide we have is indicate the services that are personally important to you. So we kind of take those services that are there, and then which ones are really important to you personally. Maintaining public library services are really high on the list. Parks, trails, and open spaces, which is, like I said, we're the theme that we're seeing that again. They love your special events and community events and festivals. So you kind of see what people are personally caring about that you're up to. Moving along, we have this maybe hard to understand, but hopefully not. Left axis there is the important to me personally, and then satisfaction level. I don't know if this has a pointer or not, but that top right quadrant is really where you want to be. And you can see that you've got this really strong, it's important to me, and you're doing a great job with maintaining public parks, trails, and open space. That's like the tops. So you get to pat yourself on the back. You get to really talk big about the fact that people are very happy about that. Also on that top right section, library services and maintaining streets and roads. They're happy with these things. Police services show up as well. Really strong numbers. I wouldn't say, I don't want to dismiss at all the energy planning component. It's just not top of mind. And I think that it's important to understand, while you had great turnout tonight, not everybody is thinking about City Hall all the time, and not everybody is thinking about some of those broader public policy issues that are really near and dear to what you're up to. So if it's these things are priority policy priorities, some of these things might be turned up when it comes to the volume of communication and outreach to make sure that the public understands what you're up to on this subject. Moving along to satisfied or dissatisfied with services provided by the city, 89–90% are satisfied. This is where I say this is not an academic exercise. This is not a A-. We're Americans. We don't agree on anything. So if we have 50% plus one, it's a big set of applause for us. If we're at 90%, it's off the charts. You don't see numbers like this in most communities in America. So these are really, really strong numbers. I never dismiss that 9 or 10% that say they're unsatisfied, and I'm sure you don't either. But the fact that your differential is like 9-1 is dramatic and impressive and off the charts. So you really, and if we get the chance to do this survey again next year or 2 years or 5 years, in that top right part of the slide, there'll be kind of a tracking number from year over year. Could that number be up a point or two? Maybe. But you're never going to make everyone happy, so you're really not going to have a lot of improvement on a slide like that. Next up, are you satisfied, dissatisfied with what your money's worth for your tax dollar? 2/3 say yes. So this might seem, well, not as good as the last slide, but 2/3 of your population agreeing is pretty strong. there is 30% that say they're unsatisfied with the tax dollars that they pay and the monies they get money worth they get. So certainly a group of people you want to address in that regard, and maybe that's just talking more about how far you go with their dollars. Next up, we asked the question: would you support or oppose raising taxes to support resident priorities? We're not there. Now, I think it's important to put this in perspective. I didn't say I'm going to raise your taxes by $50 a month or $500 a year or a cup of coffee a week. I just said raising taxes. And so if there's a need or a policy direction to perhaps go towards the place where you're going to be raising taxes or trying to, this should not be the determining factor. This is just kind of a basic line of more people saying no than yes, 2 to 1. Next up, we put up a whole bunch of services on the on a slide just to kind of give some perspective. I'll read them out as Cindy tries to bring it back. Police services are at 83% satisfied. Preparing for man-made and natural emergencies is 55% unsatisfied. That's where we get 55 or 35% of your population saying they're unsure. And that's a great example. I'm not thinking about City Hall. I actually don't have any idea what you're doing when it comes to emergency services. So of course you're going to have a bigger chunk of your population that is going to be unsure about how you're doing on emergency planning. 79% say that on the right side there, on the top right, say that they're satisfied with how you maintain streets and roads. And then bottom left, traffic signals, 72% are satisfied, 62% are happy with your financial stewardship, 22% unsatisfied, and 16% unsure because they're not focused on it. And then you've got housing and human services, again, 47% satisfied, 19% unsatisfied, and you've got 34% that have no context. They don't receive services from you in that regard. They don't know anyone that does. So it's a natural that they wouldn't have context for housing and human services. Moving to the next slide, we continue. We've got on the top left there, parks, trails, and open space. Off the charts number again, 89%, saying they're satisfied. Coming over to the right a little bit, promotes economic development and job creation at 63%. Off the charts for public library services, they get to get a big pat on the back because 90% are satisfied with libraries or the library. Managing growth and development, 55%. So our numbers a little bit a little closer together. And then 89% satisfied with special events like festivals and community events. And zoning and building codes are 48%. Kind of goes together a bit with that development component, and also a group of people who don't know. So that's one of those places where I think education outreach is probably due. Continuing, and I'll try to move quicker here. Supports affordable housing. Is it satisfied with how the city supports affordable housing? A little bit mixed there, 41% to 37%. And again, that kind of is difficult sometimes because it contrasts with the idea that people might not be so happy with the level of growth, and yet it kind of might be difficult to provide affordable housing in that context. Moving to methods and frequency of communication about city issues, events, incidents, and information, 77% are happy with what you're doing now. So you've got great communication with your public. How the city uses technology in the top right there to provide services like building permits, paying bills online, reporting concerns, assessing important information, accessing important information. 69%, 2/3 of your public are happy with what you're doing right now. So possibility for improvement, but really happy with where you're at right now. Stormwater flood mitigation at 61%, and then 85% happy with your current solid waste and recycling services. So, I mean, really strong positive numbers throughout. Retail options and restaurant options, 77% satisfied with retail options and 84% happy with your restaurant options. So big numbers. Big differentials between the people that are satisfied and unsatisfied. And so really positives there. When it comes to energy planning and greenhouse gas emission reductions, 46% say that they're happy, but you have that big group of people of 41% that just don't know. They're not in tune with what you're doing there. do people understand how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in their daily life? Well, you've got 85% of your residents who say they know how to do it. And then 78% who say they're capable, they feel capable of actually following through on that. So you've got, less recognition of what you're up to, but they feel like they can do it and follow through on it. Next, we've got providing affordable housing. How important is it that you prioritize that you make that a priority? 75 or 76% say that's important to them. Also, 79% in the middle say that they want you to promote environmental sustainability and climate action. And you've got 81% that say they want you to promote policies that promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So if those are policy directions, you've got big support for doing those things because your public is going to be on your side. Next slide. It's important to 97% of your residents that say they want a safe, walkable environment, and 85% say they want a safe, bikeable environment. So big support for those things. And concern over ample parking in commercial areas, 87% say that that's important to them as well. Moving on, how would you rate the city's efforts to solicit public input and engagement of residents in public in policy and programs? 81% say good or fair. I want to put this in context. Amazing engagement from your community here tonight compared to what I see in other parts of the country. But the truth is, a lot of your public, if we were to ask them, what do you want to see from engagement from City Hall? What do you want to see information? They might say, well, we want to see a copy of the budget. We want to know what they're going to vote on in the next weeks, and they got to tell us these things, and or what their plans are for environmental for climate change. Every single bit of that information is on your website. They can come and see it in your city council, but they're just not familiar with it. So if there's a priority to get this number up, then that's an engagement process. That's an education process and outreach. But still really strong numbers as it is. Next up, how would you rate the city's delivering service to residents of all abilities, from culture to ages and backgrounds, in a fair and equitable way? 77%, 78% say you're doing a really good job or a fair job there doing that. Only 5% of your population does not think you're doing a good job, think you're doing a poor job at being inclusive and bringing everybody into the fold. How would you rate the quality of accessibility of our indoor facilities, outdoor facilities, parks, athletic fields, courts, et cetera? 95% have a positive flavor towards your outdoor facilities. And then moving on to indoor facilities, you've got 95% who feel like you've got the facilities and the quality and accessibility of them are high. So really strong numbers. You're not going to improve that in almost any regard. How would you rate the city's performance in building a strong community? Tonight's a great representation of that. 94% say that you're doing that today. You're building a strong community in Falls Church. Next up, in the past 12 months, have you been in contact with any City of Falls Church employees? 69% say yes. This is one of those outliers. We don't see this number. This is big. It's a really big number. And that could be represented in, someone in Public Works just kind of saying hi at the park, or it could be, coming to City Hall to pay a bill or anything in between, or complaining somehow. Or getting pulled over. So it's a lot of different ways you might have interacted with staff, but it's a big number. Most of your residents feel like they've had some connection with staff. But among those that did, if we go to the next slide, the vast majority, 94%, said that interaction was good or fair. Only, again, 5 or 6% say that was poor. Not going to improve those numbers very much going forward. We'll skip a slide or two here, and we'll go to your demographics just so you know who your residents are. This is what they look like from a income standpoint, from an education standpoint. Well-educated, emerging ethnic minorities coming into larger numbers. And it's a little bit of an older population, but emerging younger population, and you've got a really strong older, longer-term resident that is represented as your current residents. And then if we go to the next slide, you'll see you have a little bit greater percentage of children with households than most of the rest of America. It's a little bit higher. So that's kind of unique for Falls Church. And you higher home ownership. But this is who you are. And you can also see how we contacted people. Most people were online because that's just how we communicate today. But there was a sizable component of people who we talked to on the phone, most of them, of course, on mobiles, a few of them on landlines because there's still a few of those around. I know that's a ton of information. The next slide just says there are questions. I'm certainly here to answer questions. We're going to work with staff on briefing other parts of the city, department heads. We are in this for the long haul to make sure you get the most value out of this data.
All right. Well, that was a lot of information. We thank you for coming here from California, but more importantly, for helping us gather this useful information. I think it's there's a lot there. I think a lot of good stuff there, actually. And so this has been very helpful. I'm going to open up to questions with the idea, however, that we're not going to get to every little thing in here. This report would take hours for us to go through in depth, and we don't have time to do that tonight, but I hope we can spend more time with either you or in general going through this report to kind of glean very important trends. But overall, I think it's a lot of good news for city government as best I can see. Is that a fair assessment from you?
Very much. We've seen a precipitous drop in recent years of trust in government and support in local government, and you buck that trend pretty significantly in Falls Church.
Good. All right. Well, let's open up to my colleagues for some brief questions. Anyone like to go first with anything? Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. Yeah, definitely another time I would love to do the deeper dive. But one thing that you mentioned, Mr. Pawlowski, that struck me that I would love more information on is you said 69% of people have been in touch with city staff in the past 6 months, and that's really big.
Yes.
And so that made me realize that in general, as I look at these numbers, I need some sort of benchmark or comparison, right? Because I have no idea whether 69% is common or not.
Yes.
And so is this available to us for everything that you've shown us? Is there a way to compare ourselves with other jurisdictions that you've worked with or neighbors that we know are these good, bad, or on par?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple ways we can do that. And we'll work with staff to identify. We can kind of give you a few anonymous, similarly situated communities. Or if you say, we want to look at ourselves compared to Vienna, Arlington, whatever, give us the 5 or 6 communities. If they have a survey they've done, we will do that comparison. And sometimes the questions, sometimes we've done the survey, so we can make it, apples to apples. Even if the questions are a little bit different, we'll give you that comparison. So absolutely, we can deliver that and put that into the report.
Great. And then the second kind of just macro takeaway I took was that you mentioned, I think 20% of people work in Falls Church. And I think when we last did the demographics report for the housing chapter of our comp plan, I want to say that number was much lower. And as we've talked about kind of the post-COVID work environment and how that changes, I guess something for our planning department to think about is obviously that's shifted a lot. Because I think traditionally we've thought about how there weren't very many jobs in Falls Church. And now post-COVID with people working from home, where you live matters a lot more than where you work. And obviously that has impacts to both kind of the housing that we provide, the jobs, the transportation, people spending, their lunch hour, frankly, in town. And so I would love to spend more time on that shift, I think, that we're seeing in our community and what that means for planning efforts long term.
Yeah, I think, slide 7 and 8 are exactly speak to that. And one of the cool things that, while it's not in this deck, we have all that demographic data. So you're not just wondering who it is in your population that's commuting and not commuting or living here and working here. We know exactly who they are, age, gender, geography, income, all those things. So you can really build that into your planning process.
Great. And then my third one is, while I know that there's a lot to celebrate in here, I think the 3 things that struck me as the unsure category that people have a lot of unsure comments about was around things that actually we care a lot about in this community. So zoning, development, and housing and human services were the 3 that I think I saw consistently. People just didn't have a good sense of are we doing well? Are we not doing well? And so I think that's a note for us up here as well as staff to do a better job of communicating, educating, and doing outreach on why we actually have policies and why we have projects around those things. So I think it's a good takeaway for us too.
This is where I say, and no one's twisted my arm on this. This is where I say you probably allocate more money towards outreach and education in your PIO because that's how those messages are going to get out there. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. It's really informative and interesting.
Ms. Leon?
I'd love to know, thank you so much for this informative survey. As part of the work that you're doing for us, are you going to include, recommendations or kind of your perspective for when we do this again, what to do differently?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. We like to present both to staff and to council and policymakers and get feedback before I suggest that I know how the world should work and make recommendations. But absolutely, there's definitely some things based upon this data that different questions we might ask, some we might not do next time, and also in that comparison that we start to build out, maybe from there's some ideas that come for how to do things differently moving forward.
Thank you. Second question, are you able to distill from the data, like of those that responded, a correlation to how many households are represented by the 400 in your survey?
I can. So we do not restrict multiple respondents per household, because you might have a 22-year-old living there and a 69-year-old living there and have very different experiences. And so we want to be, there's no logic to being exclusive, one per household, but I can get you the data. I think it's probably pretty limited, probably in the single or teens number of multiple respondents per household, because we were randomly selecting people, so it would have been very limited chance of that. But I'll definitely get that number.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other, Ms. Siscott?
Yes, just to add on a couple of things that Letty said, one, I also would like to see the background data. I would be interested in that, especially with regard to in addition to those three questions you asked, Letty, was the one I was concerned about was fiscal stewardship details. I would love to see, because that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, whether fiscal stewardship means tax rate or something more significant about using reserves, or I'd like to see the details because that's a little bit amorphous to me.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Again, thank you for all this. To me, I think knowing where the numbers lie in comparison with others is very helpful. We already sort of touched on that, but that's to me the real utility. I mean, obviously when something's 95%, you feel pretty good about it, but when things are 62, is that a good number? Oh yeah, it's great. You just, we don't have enough experience with survey results of localities to really analyze that. So if you could add some value to us with either through your analysis or additional numbers, metrics, or just flat out just telling us that's a great number or that's not, whatever it might be, I think that'd be really useful to us.
For sure. We'll work with Cindy for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much. This has been really helpful. Look forward to Mr. Snyder's got a question remotely, so let's take that, and then we're going to take a break. Mr. Snyder?
I don't want to get in the way of the break, that's for sure. But question, is there any way to cross-tabulate this about voters or potential voters?
Yes, we generally can. So the difference there between resident and voter in Falls Church, I suspect, is somewhere in the high teens or low 20s and maybe even less than that, of people who are residents and eligible to vote but aren't registered. So it's a small number, but yes, we can probably look at that and maybe add a crosstab on that. Yeah.
And these are very good feedback that we'll follow up on. And I do want to flag that we will share a fuller report. This was a 33-slide deck, and the staff got 216. And the full report, the draft I have right now is like 1,400 pages, so you can get all the open comments and a lot of more cross-tabbing that we didn't see tonight. But certainly, these specific asks we can follow up as well.
We don't encourage printing that out.
Not environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you once again. Let's go ahead and take a break until 9:45 and then accelerate the pace of our meeting so we can get out of here at a reasonable hour. Anyway, we're adjourned or recessed until 9:45. All right, we are back from recess, and I don't know if we're even ready to start regular business yet, but let's try to accelerate our pace here, get out of the reasonable hour. So next up is the East End Small Area Plan, is that right?
That is correct, Mayor, and we set it up as a work session to give you an update on the community engagement and what has changed. So I know we have Mr. Stoddard in the room and Emily Bazemore, who's the lead planner. And so since we have a lot on the agenda, I'll just turn it right over.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, Council. Nice to see you guys. Tonight, Council is requested to hold a final work session to review the revised draft East End Small Area Plan. Staff will incorporate final edits into the plan based on feedback received. The Planning Commission is scheduled to make its formal recommendation to Council on June 7, 2023. Final consideration by City Council is scheduled for June 26, 2023. The plan has been revised to incorporate input and feedback from the community received through the community meetings, pop-ups, public listening session, and the survey, as well as input and feedback from the city boards and commissions. Notable updates to the draft plan include, number one, a revised vision statement and goals that focus on the Vietnamese culture of Eden Center rather than the structure itself. Number two, an anti-displacement toolkit in the economic development chapter. Number three, strategies that focus on the recognition of the Eden Center area as Little Saigon East and placekeeping measures for the neighborhood. Number four, a concept for a hotel, cultural center, and/or flexible plaza space and a park to support visitors to the Eden Center. Number five, strategies that support the revitalization of Fort Taylor Park. So some updates since the February 6, 2023 Council work session. Since then, staff has conducted further community engagement through 4 pop-up style events held on site at the Eden Center. It was nice seeing a lot of you guys out at those. The pop-ups were held on March 18th, March 22nd, March 29th, and the final one on April 22nd. Staff collected feedback that focused on the following. Number one, the preservation of Eden Center. Number two, anti-displacement measures for Eden Center businesses. Number three, increased safety measures. Number four, maintenance of buildings and cleanliness. Number five, an increase in parking at Eden Center. Number six, support for plaza space for celebrations without impeding on parking. Now I want to highlight the matrix beginning on line 42. On April 19th, the Viet Police Collective provided a written comment letter detailing 7 specific requests. These are highlighted in the matrix. Staff response is on the right-hand side. I just want to highlight the different items in the letter. So number one is to make anti-displacement a primary goal of the SAP. Number two, add a legally binding agreement to fund anti-displacement strategies using tax revenue. Number three, implement culturally relevant anti-displacement strategies. Number four, increase the total amount of free parking spaces. Number five, formally designate POA 5 as Little Saigon East. Number six, ensure infrastructure improvements and community safety as a requirement of any development plan. Number seven, commission Vietnamese artists for any public art. Now I'm going to hop over to line 45. This is where we just visited the Planning Commission for a work session on May 3rd. The matrix below highlights their comments, their concerns, and their questions, as well as some preliminary responses from staff. All edits based off of those will be incorporated in the draft following this work session tonight. Now I'm going to move over to line 121. This is where we get into some draft chapters. So our new draft is dated April 2023. I want to note that those draft chapters contain changes that are noted in red, easier for the viewer to see what has changed since September of 2022. I want to move down to line 150. This is the revised vision statement that can be found in chapter 2, which is our concepts chapter. The heart of the East End is the Eden Center, a cultural hub that serves as another home to many. Vietnamese culture is celebrated through placekeeping, preservation of businesses, and the establishment of the cultural district Little Saigon East. Transportation investments put people first by prioritizing connectivity and accessibility. Green spaces provide opportunities for community members to gather, recreate, or relax. A green approach to infrastructure building and site design support the environmental sustainability of the area for future generations. Nearby housing affordability is preserved as complementary new commercial and residential development responsibly occurs within the East End. Equitable planning is at the forefront of reinvestments. The revised draft goals also found in the concepts chapter are the following. Number 1, preserve and promote the Vietnamese cultural identity of the Eden Center. Honor Vietnamese heritage through culturally respectful design and placekeeping. Celebrate local Vietnamese history through programming and investments around Eden Center. Uplift the people and the culture by prioritizing the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Number 2, enhance multimodal mobility and accessibility throughout the East End. Invest in safe connections to ensure equitable, safe travel opportunities amongst pedestrians, cyclists, transit users, and personal vehicles. Number 3, activate public spaces to create those community connections. Strengthen the sense of community in the East End by providing spaces for the public to enjoy and gather. Incorporate green spaces to blend nature into the urban environment. Number 4, preserve and expand housing opportunities in and around the East End. As the planning opportunity area develops, preserve the quality and the affordability of existing nearby housing. Provide design transitions between existing housing and new development. Create housing that is accessible to a variety of household sizes, ages, and a range of incomes. Ensure that affordable housing serves and supports the East End community. Number 5, support economic investments throughout the East End. Prioritize anti-displacement strategies to promote the longevity of small businesses in the Eden Center. Invest in the East End to create and maintain consistent economic activity. And finally, number 6, develop the area in an environmentally sustainable way, consistent with the principles of stewarding the area for the benefit of future generations. So other changes throughout the draft are noted in subsequent sections of the staff report. I'm going to skip to line 286 to briefly look at the changes in economic development. So the revised chapter introduces various economic development strategies for the area. This chapter is broken up into 3 different sections that focus on the following themes. So number 1 is that anti-displacement toolkit. Number 2 is the Little Saigon East placekeeping, marketing, and branding section. And finally, number 3 is future reinvestment in the East End. Now I'm going to move over to line 452. This is where we began to get into our community engagement efforts. Those kicked off all the way back in fall of 2021 and have continued into spring of 2023. I'm going to move over to line 515. This is where we talk about our Eden Center pop-up events. So again, we had those events on March 18th, March 22nd, March 29th, and finally that last one on April 22nd. I want to highlight different questions that we asked the community at those events. So for our first pop-up, we asked, what does Eden Center mean to you? We also asked, how do we celebrate Vietnamese culture at the Eden Center? For pop-up number 2, we asked, what would you like to see improved at the Eden Center area? Number 3, we asked, what is your hope for the future of the Eden Center area? And it's not noted right here, but I do want to note that at pop-up number 4, we shared the revised vision statement, we shared revised goals, and we also shared strategies that tie into those key points of feedback collected from the community at the pop-up events. And some of those key themes of feedback can be found on line 542. And I'm just going to read them off for you guys. So more parking is needed or improved parking options. There's need for additional safety and security. There is support for changing Wilson Boulevard in the city to Saigon Boulevard. There was support for branding the area to Little Saigon or Little Saigon East. There was support for a traffic light at the gate. There was support for green spaces. There was concerns around cleanliness needing to improve, especially the bathrooms. And finally, the biggest key theme was ensuring that Eden Center remains. Attached to the staff report is a pop-up report. It goes into detail about our methodology. It gets into the specifics about feedback collected by staff at the pop-ups, and I encourage you all to take a look at it. Now I'm going to hop over to 575. This is where we get into timing. I just want to highlight that our first community meeting was back on November 6th of 2021. We went to you guys with the complete draft in September 27th, or on September 27th of 2022. And after that, we went out to boards and commissions from October to November and got that boards and commissions feedback, and it's been folded into the plan. Our second community meeting was on November 19th of 2022. We released a community survey in October of 2022. We had a planning commission listening session on January 18th of 2023. And of course, we came to you guys on February 6th to present that pop-up plan. We had the pop-ups throughout March and the last one at the end of April. We went to Planning Commission on May 3rd. The staff report does say that we were at Planning Commission again on May 17th. That meeting was canceled. Just wanted to note that as well. It was a continued work session from our previous work session. And now we're back at the City Council on May 22nd, 2023. Planning Commission has a tentative action plan for early June, June 7th, while you guys have a tentative action for June 26th. The attachments begin on line 611. I want to highlight that we have some DRC comments included. We also have the combined boards and commissions letters, the public written comments, and we have a comment letter from Capital Commercial Properties that we received on the 17th of this month. That's all from my presentation, and I welcome any questions and comments. Thank you all.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you for being at all the pop-ups. We know many of us have seen you there for many hours. We also want to thank our Vietnamese community for being so heavily involved in your participation, which I think has made this a better plan to date. It's not done. Today is just one step on that process, but I think your involvement, your participation tonight is most welcome and appreciated. Let's go ahead and open up to questions and comments from my colleagues on council and see where we go from there. Does anybody have some comments they'd like to make or questions? I mean, I have a few, but we can wait to Ms. Conley.
I just want to thank the planning staff for extending their effort for 6 more months and really making a difference this time around, doing it differently, listening to people in a new way. I think that has gone a long way towards making this a better plan. So thank you for doing that. We have all learned a lot as you've done that, and some of us were even lucky enough to go on an eating tour of Eden Center with the members of Viet Collective, and that was also delicious, and we learned a lot all at the same time. So I just want to go back to the comment matrix, which is scrolling, like starting at line 42 and going through there. And there's some of these suggestions about rebranding and other ideas. Your comments on those are, you know, you've heard positives on those. Mr. Frank mentioned he had heard negatives on those, but really we can't address that within this area plan. It would be a second set of project to be able to look at that.
That's correct. It would be a separate process to look at the cultural celebration district, to name it, to get that feedback from the community again, to see what the naming would be. We've had discussion about, you know, a cultural landscape report and like getting those histories collected and getting that foundation there before embarking on the separate journey. So yes, that's what the matrix notes.
So if we were to decide we wanted to do this, council would have to direct you to do this, direct the planning staff to do this. And it would be another, how long of a process would that be, do you think? A year, 2 years, 6 months?
I'm not sure how long the process would be.
But it would be a considerable effort in your portfolio.
Absolutely.
To do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say as we looked at that, if it's action out of the area plan, then we'd work with the planning staff and council as we develop the work plan to make sure it was
part of
scheduled
our
and
next work plan.
Timed in. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the other part that I thought was nice, because we spent a lot of time talking and learning about Eden Center, but I also like that you included some Fort Taylor Park improvements as well as part of that vision. I think that's important as well, because that's sort of the forgotten park in Falls Church. It would be nice to be able to expand that. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hardy.
Great, thank you. I want to echo Mary Beth's comments and thank you both staff. I think I was at all 4 pop-ups, Emily, and so I saw you and Zoe and Cameron and Jack working really hard, and during a rainstorm one time too at the last one. So really appreciate the extra effort to really go to the people. Also thanks the Viet Place Collective folks for engaging the community. A couple things on the response matrix. I do actually have an interest in actually exploring the cultural district or neighborhood, or kind of naming it kind of Little Saigon without taking away from the Eden Center. I feel like the two could probably coexist, and that probably needs more discussion on how. Because I think we have multiple shopping centers there. There's the Eden Center, there's the one kind of across Roosevelt and Wilson. And so those all have identities, but I think there's a way for all of them to exist together. And so I'd be interested in figuring out how to make that work. And so that's kind of one support for that for kind of post small area plan. The second, which I heard a lot of comments about tonight, is around how do we make sure we commit to the anti-displacement? While I know that there's no imminent redevelopment planned, incorporating that as a strategy in the small area plan makes sense to me. And in fact, I actually would love to see in other plans that we do. I think Founders Row 1 actually was one of my first votes on City Council in 2016. And one policy we had put in place at the time is that displaced businesses, if they relocate in the city, we would waive their permit fees. And so that was kind of one very small effort that we had done back in 2016. I love a lot of these ideas in here. And so I know one of the concerns was, gosh, if you do this for the East End, you should do it everywhere else. And I say, yes, I would love to see that done elsewhere. So that's another vote of support for that. So I love the thinking and all the work that you all put in there. But what I did want to call out, though, is, and maybe a question for the city attorney, is on line section number 2 or 3. The request, I think, from our Vietnamese community was how to make this legally binding. And I think the response I see from staff is that we can't use small area plans as that vehicle to commit dollars. That's really a budgeting process. Is that correct?
Yes, a plan serves as a general guide, and in order to make something from a plan binding, you would need to convert it into an ordinance and appropriate monies, but the ordinance would make it binding.
So while we're in the phase of the small area plan, I guess I'm fine with the language and all the details you put into the anti-displacement chapter, but I guess we would need to do it through a separate budget process if we were to commit dollars against it in the future, if investment or displacement actually were a real risk. I think is probably would be the trigger, I think, when we would consider that. But in general, I support the idea of thinking about how to protect and continue a lot of these businesses beyond the East End. The third area that I made a note of is a lot of the pop-ups surfaced concerns that are outside the small area plan scope. So I think you had a list of a bunch of them, Emily. So safety, security concerns, maintenance and cleanliness, green spaces, parking. I guess the question for staff is, I don't want those comments to just kind of sit out in the void. How do we make sure that we take action on some of those and partner with the Eden Center and existing businesses to actually respond to those concerns we've heard from the community?
I think it was very important to get that response and input, and as you identified, it's sort of parallel and separate from the small area plan. So I think there's a couple things we can follow up with our Economic Development Office and with the Eden Center Management and the tenants. From economic development, we can also look at the things that we do already with our business community as a whole, and that includes some of our public safety, health inspections, building safety, to make sure that we're up to speed. Some of these may be things that Mr. Frank and the management team would need to respond to directly as the property owner, but it's something we can facilitate an ongoing conversation since it's been raised during this process.
Great. I think we talked about a couple months ago when this first came up, kind of the idea of an outreach specialist so that these efforts aren't a one and done.
Correct.
Given the importance of Eden Center to the city, it would be great to make sure these are continuous, whether it's every 6 months we go out and hear from the community, we keep up communication when we have challenges with maintenance. That, I think the city might have a role in helping be a conduit for some of that. And so if that needs to be funded in terms of a role, that's something that I'd be interested in seeing happen too.
Noted.
Great. That's it for me. Thank you.
Mr. Snyder? Can't hear you, Dave. You're muted.
Thank you. I was interested in the language on Fort Taylor Park, and I'm glad that we're making a point of that. I know that came out of the Historical Commission, so I think I want to make sure that what we're doing is what was recommended by the Historical Commission. And I'm pleased, I guess, if there's a specific reference of bus rapid transit for the highway area. Am I reading that right? And that has a direct support element to Eden Center in that it would provide transportation readily and reliably to that area as well as other parts of the city, thereby improving air quality and reducing the need for additional parking. Doesn't mean we don't need additional parking, but would certainly reduce some of the need for that. So is there a specific mention in here of that?
Yes, the transportation chapter accounts for the BRT entering that area.
Okay, okay. And then finally on displacement, I think it's important at this point to not raise expectations beyond what we can legally and financially do. I'm a little bit concerned about government moving into the private sector and subsidizing one player versus another, because a history of that is the subsidies tend to go to less efficient operations. I'm not saying that would be the case here necessarily, but I think we need to caveat that language a little bit with consideration. What is the precedent? What will the state allow us to do? What should we do that would achieve our objectives without inadvertently subsidizing enterprises that would otherwise fail without the subsidy? And overall, make sure that we're not creating the impression that all the tax money coming from the Eden Center would be returned to the Eden Center. Because if that were true, then any homeowner could claim, well, the money that I pay in taxes ought to only go to my direct benefit. And that's clearly not what the tax generation element is. But again, I don't object to looking at these things, but I'm a little bit concerned that we don't raise expectations beyond what we can and should actually deliver, both in the area of displacement and in the area of services returned to the Eden Center with Eden Center tax money. So those are just general concerns moving forward. So I do suggest with the toolkit that we not create the impression that we are committing to doing all of these things. And I know the request was made for certain commitments, and we'll look at them in other legislation. We'll look at the financial aspects of that. But even as we want to be responsive, I would be fearful of creating expectations that one way or another we're not able to live up to or shouldn't as a matter of law or finance. So thanks. Those are the comments that I wanted to make.
All right. So I've got a few comments. One, I think one of the major things, first off, Eden Center is a gem. It's not an undiscovered gem, but it's a gem. I think we in the city have not spent as much time, frankly, as we should, really understanding it and becoming acquainted with it and the people there, the businesses there. And so this process, I think, has been very helpful, at least to me, to really spend some time there, some quality time, really understand and meet some of the business owners more than I've done in the past. So I think it's been very useful for that. Secondly, I would say I think we should not lose that momentum, like in terms of the communication that's occurring now and has over the past months. I think it'd be really helpful to everyone, the city, people on city council, but also to the businesses and guests and other people who associate with Eden Center to continue that going forward in some fashion, whether that's a Chamber of Commerce, any kind of special group that can help represent the interests and needs of folks at Eden Center. I think that's something that would be very useful to explore if we can continue to do that going forward. I do have some questions about some of the things here. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff here. And I think the notion for many of us is to make a good thing better or a great thing even better, and not to change it, not to, bulldoze it and start anew. I don't think anyone in this dais wants to do that. We want to make better what's already extremely, extremely good. So to my mind, that's not what I foresee the future of Eden Center as being, redeveloped into a bunch of apartments. That's not what I expect to see or want to see or hope to see or want to enable or make easier. What I'd like to see is a really good thing be made better. How? Maybe better landscaping, better celebration of culture, better transportation, better sidewalks, better integration in our overall regional transportation system, better parking. Things like that, I think, are the real critical elements that can make Eden Center even better. So I do think we ought to be thinking about those things in particular. I would ask the city attorney, so we've been talking about displacement for a particular area of the city, not the entirety of the city. Is that even possible to say we have a set of rules for a particular part of the city in an ordinance form? This part gets displacement dollars, someone else may not.
I don't know the answer to that this evening. I would really have to look at that and bring it back to you.
Okay. I mean, to my mind, this is something we ought to consider citywide. Not that, one group of small businesses is different than another. They're different, but in the same way, they have the same needs. And so I would want to consider this holistically throughout our city. And I think probably it's more legally, defensible than for a particular part of the city. But I would defer to your judgment on that issue.
And if I could, Mayor, just a slight add, as you'll note in the staff report, there's several areas that are flagged as a work order with the city attorney to get her up to speed on this, and the intent is to follow up on that prior to this coming back for council action.
Got it. I would also, as it relates to this name, Little Saigon versus Eden Center, I do think Eden Center is a brand a lot of times and put into creating a successful brand. And so I think we need to be careful how we might integrate that and really, tread lightly on a very recognizable brand, certainly within this area, maybe within the whole country. So that's something that I'm not against pursuing or having further discussion on, but I think we should be very careful with messing with a good thing. Let's see what else I've got here as far as comments. Really things like, again, celebrating the culture through art, green space. The Eden Center needs more green space. It just, I'm looking at you, Alan. I don't know what you could do, but plant some grass someplace in there or some trees, and kind of soften the edges up around. I think it would really be helpful. I don't know if more parking is able to be done someplace. I know years ago the thought of maybe some structured parking in the rear. It's certainly a need, and maybe it could be mitigated or eliminated through better transit connectivity through BRT, rapid transit, connectivity, shuttle bus to metro, something like that. But at present, I think there's a real issue with parking at times, maybe Sundays particularly, maybe Saturdays as well, holidays, which is unfortunate because there's customers who want to come there who may not because can't find a place to park. I don't know if there's an easy answer to that. I know there's not a cheap one, but I think that's something that as a property owner would be great to keep working to try to get better parking options or better transit options. And we want to partner with you on that, right? Transit, regional transit, that's in our neck of the woods, the things we can do and help get bus lines to stop there, bus shelters, things like that. But overall, I think you've done some fine work. And again, most appreciate the leadership and the involvement of our Vietnamese community to make this a better plan. Look forward to seeing this when you're ready for the next round of this. So thank you all.
Thank you all.
All right. Let's keep going. We haven't even started business on the agenda. We're on to West Falls Senior Housing Extension briefing. Cindy, are you going to do that, or who's running that?
Let me do a brief introduction. I'm going to turn it over to our Hoffman partners that are here this evening. So in your council packet, you have a quick overview of the request to look at the senior housing component and extend that. And as part of that discussion, we plan for this evening to be a public briefing by our Hoffman partners who have joined us this evening. And then later this evening, Council, you have the option, as we advertised on your agenda, to do a closed session where myself and the city attorney can give you some more details on that. And so we'll base that decision once you get through this and the rest of your agenda if you want to have that closed session. So with that, I think what we'll do is turn it over for the presentation. I will note that we have a few slides that is coming forward on the West Falls development. In your packet, you do have the letter dated May 15th on some of the ask and the why, and then also an economic forecast document. So with that, Mary Beth, can I ask you to introduce yourself and just let me know when you're ready to advance the slide.
Is that mic on? It sounds like it may not be, sorry.
Here we go. Is that better?
I think so,
Okay.
yeah, thanks.
All right, well, good evening, all of you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you tonight. My name is Mary Beth Avedisian. I'm a Senior Vice President of Development for Hoffman and Associates, and I have oversight responsibility for this beautiful project at the West Falls Church Metro Station. I'm here tonight with our company president, Sean Seaman, and we want to brief you and answer any questions you might have about our request to extend the closing date listed in the comprehensive agreement for the transfer of the leasehold interest in the senior living parcel to a replacement senior developer and operator. But before I delve into the specifics of our request, I want to first give you a construction progress update so you can see how far we've come since this development was kicked off only a year ago. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. What you see on this slide is a construction progress for phase 1A of the project. We signed the comprehensive agreement on May 13th, 2022. That's only a year ago. And in that year, we've made tremendous progress. In the upper left corner, the 126-unit residential condo building is now 40% complete with delivery expected in June of 2024. Below that is the future 146-key Home 2 Suites Hotel by Hilton, which is 30% complete now and will be substantially complete by the end of the year. Behind the hotel is a 364-space parking garage that's 75% complete and will be substantially complete 2 months from now. In the lower left corner is the 125,000 square foot medical office building that Trammell Crow Company is developing and will have substantially complete by October of this year. Then across the internal boulevard and in the lower right corner is the 400-unit rental apartment building, which is 25% complete and slated for substantial completion in November of 2024. The light blue rectangle directly above the apartment building is another structured parking garage that'll hold 603 spaces. Today, it's 65% complete, and it'll be finished early next year in February of 2024. That brings me to the last component of phase 1 of the project and the reason why we're here tonight, the senior living building. You may remember that the senior parcel required a lengthened time frame and a separate closing because the parcel was to be developed by a third-party developer operator. This part of the project is known as Phase 1B. An affiliate company of Trammell Crow Company, next slide, please. This affiliate company of Trammell Crow was the contract purchaser from the master developer for the leasehold interest in this parcel of land so that they could develop it with a 15-story senior living building. And under the comprehensive agreement, as currently written, the closing of that purchase has an imminent deadline in June. Our statement of justification included in your packet explains why we need an extension of the closing deadline. It explains that Trammell Crow was unable to secure financing commitments to proceed with this project within the required timeframe of the agreement. So they notified us earlier this year that they could not move forward. We cooperated with them over several months leading up to this final decision, granting them multiple time extensions so that they could try to pursue alternative sources of capital, but in the end, they just couldn't make it happen. So we immediately sprang into action to find a replacement developer for the senior parcel, and we're actually making really good headway on that front. But that effort takes time, and we have this fast approaching deadline in the comprehensive agreement that needs to be extended in the meantime. The substitution of a new development partner requires that that purchaser start much of the pre-development process all over, including their due diligence, any design, SESP modifications, permitting, securing financing, and all of that takes time. Closing on the senior parcel is defined as the Phase 1B closing in the comprehensive agreement. So we're asking Council to approve extending the milestone for the Phase 1B closing by a year from June 13th of 2023, just 2 weeks from now, to June 13th of 2024. As indicated in the schedule shown on the slide, This additional time will allow us to fully vet a replacement senior developer and operator and allow them time to modify their approvals, complete design documents, identify equity and debt sources so that they can move forward developing the senior parcel. In addition, our proposed amendment adjusts substantial completion and the final completion, both the target date and the outside date of the senior building to align with this revised closing schedule. To give the city comfort that a suitable replacement senior developer has been identified, we have and has a proven track record of execution and delivery and is committed to the project, we propose coming back to you later this year in September to present to you and seek your approval of a new senior living developer and operator. There is much more to tell, but since I only have 5 minutes tonight, I'll yield the mic to council members for questions at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Anything else staff wants to add before we go to questions, comments?
Not at this point.
All right, questions, comments? All right. Oh, go ahead. Carolyn?
Thank you for the schedule. I'm looking at the year extension, and I had asked this question earlier to the city manager who wasn't here, and I was advised to ask you. But back me into why a year versus 6 months versus 8 versus 9.
Would you like to? Oh,
you've got.
I was just gonna point to the schedule, which is on here. This bar schedule indicates the period length of time to do certain things like negotiate a contract with them, let them do their due diligence on the contract. In the meantime, the design documents are have to be completed. They may choose to redesign the building, in which case they may come back and ask for an SESP change modification. They need to get permitting and financing and all of those things. They can't all happen at the same time. Things have to be in place before the next step can start. There's some overlap, as you can see in this schedule, but it really is to start fresh with someone new. You would be in the same predicament, whether we were in the picture or they were trying to work with somebody. And I really feel that we can marshal them through this in a timely fashion, since we've been through this process with you. Bringing someone in without the experience of having worked in the City of Falls Church, I don't think will be a detriment, because of the fact that we are the common red thread that ties the project together, and we know the process here. But it really does take that amount of time. Sure.
If I might, I'm Sean Seaman, president of Hoffman, and I attended with Mary Beth just because she's just joined the company, and I don't want to put her on the hot seat, and how we got here and some of the predecessor events. I think the long pole in the tent, and we included that Cushman study on sort of the status of the economic world. It's a little bit difficult to digest. I think the punchline in that is all things really right now flow through the debt markets and the ability to identify a debt lender for a project. So even if it was Trammell Crow, if it's a replacement provider, finding the debt requires a design that's completed. It requires construction documents that can get priced by a contractor and a real viable business plan to get your debt provider and a loan in place. With the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic and everything that's going on in the capital markets with the Fed and the uncertainty if it's going up or down and where inflation's going and the debt ceiling, the debt markets are closed. I mean, all lenders are sitting on the sideline until they know what's going on. We can't, with a straight face, for any of our commercial projects, go to a lender and try to initiate a loan on projects in DC that are just apartments or, good sponsor, good location. No one's lending. So we've really paused all of our efforts for lending on commercial projects until the end of 2023. And the reality for a closing is probably, first quarter of 2024. So I think the timeline is realistic. 6 months and expecting that somebody's going to have the full capital stack in place and be able to provide the purchase price for the senior parcel at the end of 23, I think is just unrealistic. And I think we're sensitive to, the asks and being in front of this body and don't want to be doing it every 3 or 4 months and continuing to kick the can. The Trammell thing was really disappointing. They're strong sponsors. They're developing our medical office building. We had every, faith that they were going to pull through, and they continued to sort of kick it, in a week, 2 weeks, another month. And I think we'd be better off, as partners with the city to try to find a strong senior provider that has the capital, that has the operator, and can really make the commitment going forward. So that's why we're in this place and making the ask tonight.
So I think my reaction is I get the waterfall and the sequence of events. Given that the reason why we're here is financing, I'm a little surprised that this timeline is showing that you're giving 3 months to find it, given the environment. And you've allocated a longer stack, in green to design. So I'm just trying to litmus test this, right? Because what we don't want is to be in this situation again in a year, asking for another extension because we simply underestimated what it took to get it done right the first time.
Sure. I appreciate that. And perhaps the 90 days is not generous enough for the financing. I think it would probably start before the yellow line on there and potentially extend
But
out.
I was hoping maybe you want to slide that up if
Yeah.
You're taking a look at trying to make this hang together a little bit more is the biggest issue. So that's when I look at this, and that's the largest concern, right? It's just the credibility of that, right? Just given those two factors, really long design periods, you want to stabilize that sooner than later, and financing for 3 months. Is it just we're going to try and wait out the markets a little bit, which is why we defer for a whole 10 months before looking at financing? Or is there more to why we placed that financing to start in month 10?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it should start sooner. I think we probably could start sooner. The design, our preference is not to restart the design. I'd prefer to just use the existing design that's there. The project is completely cross-collateralized between all of our uses and the senior parcel. Our LP investor is expecting the money for the senior sale. Our debt lender is expecting the money for the senior sale to come in, and that was meant to be used as equity for building the commons and all the rest of the project. As soon as June comes around, it's going to be $100,000 a month in additional financing costs for our side of the project until they can close. So I think we are in fact aligned with the city and trying to get them to the finish line as fast as humanly possible and putting real milestones and yardsticks in any agreement that we have with them.
And how's the progress on finding that replacement partner? Are you in a position that you can say that you've got strong interest in a couple, or is it still pure due diligence? You're out there in the market trying to get interest?
Sure, it's a great question. We have strong interest. We had sort of two paths. One was hire a broker and actually broadcast it really widely, which takes time because it's a process and there's responses. And we had a couple that were unsolicited, interested parties that came and heard that there might be a senior parcel. There's two that are quite strong. 4 have responded to, we put all of our information in a due diligence FTP site where people can download the information after they sign an NDA for it. 2 have done a full underwriting on it, and we've started to.
2 out of 4?
2 out of 4, yeah, and we've started to socialize, terms around a term sheet with them. So we're making good progress. Yeah. I think the September date that we put out there is realistic for being back in front of this body with a senior partner by our side and a plan how we get to the finish line.
And you're also doing some due diligence on your side for those that have cast interest just on kind of their health financially and
yes,
and taking, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Both would need to bring in both an LP investor partner and depending on which we're talking about, one sort of, one or both may have sort of the operational element within their tent as well. So just trying to get the LP investor and the operator and the developer all aligned in a coherent package where we believe that they can actually perform is the diligence that we're doing.
Yeah. So is your intent to cross-compete that, like when they submit their really kind of proposals to you for some of this stuff, are you looking to break it down to the first two and then actually bring in both in for a deal discussion? Or you're going to structure it so you've got some criteria up front, then you're just going to try to shoot for the best one?
I think I don't know sitting here tonight, but I think the idea would be to get it to sort of the best and the one that we're putting forward as a recommendation rather than to bring multiple parties forward. We definitely want to get the best outcome for the operator and the city, and to try to replace some of the economics that have been lost already.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Snyder?
Thank you. So this is a comprehensive agreement. Both sides have agreed to perform. And now you're saying you have issues on your side. What are you willing to provide the city in return for us offering you this additional flexibility? That would be point number one. Point number two, I would recommend that whatever we do, we establish a preliminary milestone. Intents are great, but I'd like to assure, in other words, condition on the relief requested that a developer be established and be identified and in place the way that we've just heard the developer say that they plan to do. In other words, I would establish some milestones. Finally, I think it's been asked of the city manager, and I would ask again, two questions. Number one, does this affect the payments, the timing and payments to the city under the comprehensive agreement? And number two, does it have any effect on the Community Development Authority for which we've agreed to issue bonds?
And I've made note of those, and those are some of the items that the city attorney and I are willing to address during closed session if you choose to tonight, or a confidential memo. I have had conversations with Hoffman Associates on some milestones, because that was raised during the council meeting when Mr. Shields reported this initially. And so the reference date that has been made to the September 2023 is proposed as a milestone to add to the comprehensive amendment number 5, to say that they'd come back with the operator by September. And you just heard Mr. Seaman say that's a reasonable time frame. They will have to come back to amend the documents because we specifically called out the developer as Trammell Crow, so that's going to have to change. So they'd come together with developer and operator. Also have been in conversation to add an actual construction commencement date, because right now the schedule does not have a date for which construction of the senior living would be built. So those are two items that I can note tonight. And for anything else that Mr. Snyder asked for, what Hoffman Associates is bringing to the table, I'll defer to you. I know you've been looking at the pedestrian signalization at Haycock and Mustang, for example.
Sure, I'll let Mary Beth answer about I think one request was temporary signalization on Haycock at Mustang Alley in advance of the final intersection improvements. I believe the final intersection is going to be in place in November of this year. So there's a period of time during the school year that the final signal won't be in place. We've been doing everything by the book as far as VDOT's concerned, so that it's just the regular permitting and procurement delays around the signals and the stanchions that go in. Our construction management team's looking at temporary signals that could be rented. You press a button and lights come on so you can cross. So that may be one thing that we're able to do as part of the construction management for the project moving forward. I don't have all of the details, but we can further those with the city manager. As far as what else, I appreciate it's a comprehensive agreement. Unfortunately, this part of the comprehensive agreement, we were relying on a third-party purchaser that didn't produce the results that we were hoping for, and find ourselves in a situation. We don't really have a lot to give. I think things like the intersection improvements and milestone dates in the interim, we're happy to do as long as they're sort of reasonable, and whoever the contract purchaser is can actually achieve them. I'm motivated as well because we want to get them to the finish line. I just anecdotally, we're facing, our own financial struggles. We're not here asking for a reduction in purchase price or any of that. We're not trying to retrade our side of the deal. Our interest rates have gone from 5 or 6% to 8.5%. Our budget has increased by $12 million. It's pretty much wiped out the contingencies for the projects. There's not a lot more to sort of give, just in light of the financial market that we find ourselves in. So, we're happy to be creative and look for things around the edges. But I thought the signal was a good thing that we could certainly explore and have more information for the next time we meet.
Okay, let's see other questions. Ms. Hardy.
Great, thank you. I think I was the one that proposed the milestones. I'm glad to hear that you guys are committing to September 30th for naming your new partner. And I would be supportive of understanding what other milestones there might be between now and the next 12 months. I think we're certainly sympathetic to the capital markets and then financial environment, but I think it would be good to have kind of alignment on forward progress for everybody. Just to set expectations, so we're only talking about 12 months, and so there's nothing else in the comprehensive agreement like voluntary concessions that would be changing, or you'd be coming back to retrade, correct?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
It's what's in front of you right now.
Okay. And that's really more so that we put the marker in the sand now so that we don't have to have this conversation again in 3 months. We're like, oh, here's this other thing that we want to readdress. Especially, I think, the senior partner in particular. I think there was a voluntary concession that in lieu of the affordable housing units, there would be a cash in lieu payment every year with a 3% escalator, if I remember correctly. And so I want to make sure that's not on the table again, and that is still something that your new partner will be committing to. Besides the Mustang Alley temporary signal, so I'm glad that you guys are open to that. I think you heard the public comment about potholes and repaving in general around the site, as the streets are quite a mess. And so it would be great, you don't have to answer now, but to give staff an update on when the streets will be in better condition, and if that's something that we can accelerate. I think the community especially has been very patient around the site while the construction's been happening. And so if you all can continue to keep us updated on when that repaving might happen, or patchwork in the interim until the streets all get done, because I know some of it has to be dependent on the large intersection improvements that are going into.
Certainly.
That'd be great.
I think Mary Beth wanted to say, did you want to add something on the affordable?
I just wanted to point out that Sean had mentioned earlier, we set up a due diligence war room, a virtual war room, where all of the voluntary concessions were placed in that war room as well. We did a summary of what was requirement under the comprehensive agreement, including the affordable housing payments, and we wanted to make sure and call out front and center to whoever was expressing interest in the property that it was our expectation they were going to assume all of those responsibilities.
Great. That is good to hear. And while we've got you, can we go back to the slide that showed the site and delivery, please? I had a question about actually garage D2. So I was at Bertrand Broad over the weekend, and I know the western facade is supposed to be hidden by your phase 2 building D3. Right now, it's just a giant wall. Is there an interim plan? And I went back to the site plan to look for myself to see what we approved, and actually didn't specify. You don't have a view of it here, but if you actually stand on Haycock, kind of from the giant shopping center looking over, only that bottom corner right where it says Magnolia shows, but the rest of the facade is actually all a giant blank concrete wall in anticipation eventually that there will be a phase 2 building right there. But obviously phase 2 is going to be several years away. Do you know what the plan is for that facade?
There's no plan to change that facade because of the fact that there will eventually be a building next door. So any additional windows, sight lines, whatever punctures that you'd put in it would have to be closed back up. So it was developed with that facade with the intention that it will ultimately be hidden from view.
Okay, and refresh my memory on how far out phase 2 is.
Do you remember phase 2 timing? Oh, wait, I have it right here, I think. No, this is just phase 1. I'm sorry, I don't have that.
Yeah, I don't have it right off the top of my head.
And so I guess I would ask then for us to think about something temporary because it is a giant gray concrete facade. And if that is several years away, we should think of creatively about what sort of temporary green wall or mural or something, because something needs to go up. I know that, again, it'll be hidden, and obviously you guys your costs are escalating. I hear that, but the community can't look at that for however many years.
Okay, we'll get back to you.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Conley?
Yeah, thanks for this presentation. One of you had mentioned concerns just about the Promenade Street, that your financing is tied up in, there's a cascading thing that happens when things are changed. And I'm just wondering, can you just elaborate on that a little bit more?
It was just that we were relying on the purchase price for the senior to forward fund project costs. So I mean, the project budget is still the same. We're not reducing the budget. We're just needing to come out of pocket with our own equity or borrow on the loan from the lender sooner than we otherwise would have.
So you don't see that delaying
no, that won't,
the Westfall Station Boulevard
it
promenade
not,
area?
No.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let me ask a question of staff maybe. So this will delay the senior project by a year. What is that result in a loss for the city? In other words, were we expecting tax assessment on that, other tax revenue? Do we know what that amount is?
Do you want to take that? And as city attorney responds, I just want to flag that Mr. Duncan has his hand up as well.
Got it. Yeah, I don't see it right now, but I guess it's, I'll call him right after this. Anyway, go ahead.
So, like Mary Beth, I'm pretty new to the city, but I'm getting adjusted to the agreements that we have and familiar with them. It looks like there's no guaranteed tax revenue until the final completion date for the project, which is 7 years from when it closed in 22, so in 2029.
So is that the pilot, the payment in lieu of taxes, does that go through 7 years?
What we have is not a payment in lieu of taxes. We have an abatement program where the Economic Development Incentive Agreement provides that we will refund the taxes they pay in defined amounts according to a schedule. And it's not 100%. It's 100% refund for the first 2 years of the project, which is this fiscal year and next fiscal year. And then the following fiscal year is FY25. And we would, in that year, we would expect to retain, if the building were built, which it will not be, we would have retained $250,000 of the taxes paid, assuming the building had been built. I think even if we were operating under the deadlines we have today without any extension, we would not see that building built in time to get that payment of $250,000 on assessed value. So the bottom line is there's no guaranteed. There's some projections. I can share them with you what they are in terms of tax revenues from that site, but there's nothing binding until the final completion date at the end of the project. And otherwise, this what they're proposing does not alter the rents that are due under the contract.
I'm worried about the rents. I got that on the rents, but I thought with respect to taxes, those, my recollection was, maybe I got it wrong, is that we worked out a schedule essentially that we would agree upon the property taxes or the amount of payments to the city for a period of time, like during construction and the like, but maybe that's recollection is wrong.
The Economic Development Incentive Agreement does have a schedule, but it's based on the assessed value of the properties, and there's a total amount, and then it's divvied by the different parcels. So this change doesn't impact the others, but it does impact the senior housing, which is it looks like about a quarter of the $1 million that was projected for FY25.
So it's $250,000 quote loss or money that we were expecting that we won't be getting
Yeah,
for another year.
The adopted schedule for FY25 shows 250,000, and then it steps up from there till it ends in 2028.
Okay. Okay, so we're talking about $250,000 in city revenue that may not be showing up.
That would be the maximum. There will be some payment because the property is currently assessed at 1.5 million is what I saw in the January one, because there's no building on it.
Yeah. Okay.
And we do have, I should have acknowledged Mr. Young, who's the EDA chair, who's in the audience. He was behind the pew and I forgot to acknowledge him. So of course, he and you all are more intimately involved than city attorney and I have been, but that's our initial assessment. And of course, we can, if you choose, have more discussion on that, the legal basis of those in a closed session.
Yeah, and it's a little more, I want to say it's a little more complicated than that, although that's a good starting point, because the building wasn't going to get built in that year where we were expecting 250. So we wouldn't have gotten the 250 anyway, even without this extension. The following year, we might have expected the building to be built, and in that year, we had projected a $350,000 revenue from taxes. So I guess if we're really looking at which year we're missing, we're probably missing the year where we hope to get 350,000. But all of those were projections, assuming the building got built in those early years. And
got it. So by projections, we're talking 250 or 350.
350.
Presumably, if you delay a year from what you had an agreement to do, presumably you're missing out on
well,
that.
and actually you would add 250 and 350, because if you expected it done in the first year when you got 250, then you're missing that year. You're also missing the year where you were expecting to get 350. So
my guess is probably under construction. I can't imagine the amount would go up that much in 1 year, other than it was under construction during the first year. But irrespective of that, I want to just kind of understand the magnitude of what we're talking about. That being said, I am sympathetic. Yeah. I know the markets for, financing are terrible right now. They've changed dramatically in just 6 months. So I'm well aware of kind of the headwinds you all face. I do think you've heard a few things that would be nice for you all to do. For example, the traffic light, I think it's important to our kids. We've got a whole ton of kids walking up that way come the school year beginning. And that's a dangerous situation for us. And frankly, for you, somebody gets injured there, mud goes everywhere, everything, it's not some situation I think you want to be in either. So I think I would look very closely maybe at the temporary traffic signal for everyone's best interest. I also think that wall is really a big blank concrete wall. Maybe, at some point it's going to get covered up, but I'd love to see a green wall or something in the meantime, because, things may kick out on that other building. What's the separation between the two buildings anyway? Is it 20 feet? Ultimately, for what you're planning between the garage and the next building? Do you have any of those things?
Yeah, I think it's about 20 feet.
Yeah, because you got to have the fire separation on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, a green wall could work there anyway, right? Even if you had a building in the future there. But I would just give a little thought to that. Maybe talk to your consultants whether that could work, a green wall on that facade maybe. But otherwise, I'm sympathetic to what's going on with you, and I understand it. Any other comments people have?
Could I ask a question, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, yes. Sorry, Phil. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. Of course, I agree with you on the headwinds matter. The financing environment is not going to be changed by Falls Church and Trammell Crow, but I just wonder if to build public confidence in our ability to continue to deliver on this, there's any comparables that are in the region that we could highlight. As I recall, when we were reviewing the building, it was something of a twin to a building in Alexandria. I'm just, I would feel better if we could take to the public some information about how the financing environment is, very challenging, and this particular product within that environment is maybe more or less challenged. But I don't know, just some source of information, some other example of companies and municipalities that are facing this sort of dilemma. Otherwise, it's obviously something we need to all keep locked in hand in hand with, I think, and try to make the best of a situation that's unfortunate, but certainly able to be remedied.
Hey, thanks, Phil. unless anyone else has anything else for you tonight, I think we've given you some input, maybe some things to consider, but I think overall we're understanding of your situation. And I would ask maybe the next couple of weeks you work with staff to try to resolve this for a time we can take some action on it.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks for waiting around as well.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Let's keep going. So we're now finally at 10:50, whatever, going to business on the agenda. Before we do that, are there any council requests from anyone? All right, let's go to resolutions. This is on Councilmember Hardy joining the Budget and Finance Committee.
Move to adopt TR 23-17.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any public comment? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Madam Clerk?
Who was the second on that?
Ms. Conley? Or wasn't it you?
It was both of us, either one.
All right, it's Ms. Conley. We'll give her credit for it.
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon? Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Let's move on to consent items. Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Ms. Leon on the second.
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon? Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes. All right, let's go on to other business quickly.
Sure, Mayor. You have before you a contract amendment for Espina, which is one of the firms that we use for paving and roadbed reconstruction. And the request is increase it from $400,000 a year to $1 million per fiscal year. And that is so we can accommodate the work that was just recently approved in your budget. Staff recommends approving it so we can expedite those processes. No additional fiscal impact. The money's already in your FY24 budget.
Got it. All right. Any member of the public wish to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Any council discussion? We have a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
just very quickly, I know there was a lot of discussion by council, not just paving the roads, but also moving forward on pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure with that money. Is that included in this? Is this all on paving?
This
Roads.
specific contract is for paving, but we are looking at the contracts also for traffic signals and crosswalks. Now, in some of the paving, you will get the ramping and crosswalk depending on the work we're doing.
So not a question about the specific contract, but a question that I made when we were discussing the budget process is contingent on the $800,000 that we're taking out of reserves. I had asked for two things. One is a prioritized paving list of the streets to be paved. And then the second is kind of a master list of all the sidewalks and crosswalks that we wanted to do. Can we make sure that both can be done before the fiscal year starts on July 1st and we start using the money?
Yeah, I will follow up with the Public Works Director. I know he and Mr. Shields started that discussion. They're developing it.
I know the public is very interested also in the paving schedule. People are very excited
Yep.
to know that the street might be repaved, and so if we can publish that. I know Alexandria actually publishes a citywide list of streets to be paved, so people can anticipate it, so. it'd be popular.
Yep, and as we saw from the survey, these are an important area of interest to the community.
Thank you.
All right, do we have a motion regarding this item?
Move to authorize expenditure of up to $1 million per fiscal year under existing contracts with Espina Paving for paving services and with Finley Asphalt and Sealing Inc. for paving services and full depth reclamation.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second.
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Thank you, Council.
All right, let's move on. Business not on the agenda. Any standing regional committee reports? Any council member comments that have been made yet? Anything anyone wants to say before we adjourn tonight?
GovOps' meeting tomorrow at 12. You all want to join us?
All right. Phil, glad to have you back in the saddle.
Absolutely.
Hope you're doing well.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate all the nice notes, cards, and sorry I haven't been able to respond to them individually, but hopefully I can get back in the fight.
Sounds good. We'll look forward to having you back here in person. All right, unless there's anything else, let's go ahead and adjourn for tonight. Anything else? All right, we're adjourned.
Thank you, council.
Good night.
Night, Phil.